I typically don't view these as like they're always like horrible people, but man, it's just a depraved act, you know. It's just tough. It's really, really tough.
Well, I mean, you know, it's just one of those things. It's like, you know, it's one bad decision making, you know, being made when your judgment is clouded. And you know, it just ruins, you know, it ends a life. It ruins countless other lives, including your own. You know, it's just like there was so much damage done, and you know, just one thoughtless decision. And it's just, you know, I hate to use the word, but I mean, it's sobering. It really is.
Yeah.
They had what's his name? The kicker that has a show. Wow, McAfee. He had is it? Man, I'm already blanking. We're 2 minutes in. Pagano, you could tell I'm a Colts fan, right? I got my Colts.
Yeah.
He was on there saying how, like, as a coach, when your players go away on a bye week, that's like your biggest fear. Like, that's your biggest thing that you're trying to get out as a message to your players. Like, guys, don't do anything stupid. Like, you know, stick to curfews, all that kind of stuff. And this is definitely worst case scenario.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's just, it's you know, it's like, you know, it's just an innocent person. Like, that's the worst part about these things is it's totally innocent people.
Yeah.
You know, and I was sort of open to the idea of like, hey, you know, like, I thought the initial reports, I was like, yeah, it's obviously it's terrible, but then, you know, let's wait and see on the facts. And then the facts come in and I was like, oh my God, these are like the worst I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, I'm like, I've done these for a while and it's like, oh wow. Like, okay, like we're going north of $150 and we're blowing twice the legal limit. Got it. Like, this is really bad, you know? So
yeah. And in town too. I mean,
right.
Well, according to locals, to go to that speed on that road in that area is not, you know, something that you see normally.
Well, yeah,
for sure. I mean, I wouldn't even
just because of how crowded it is, I guess.
Yeah,
how busy it is.
I wouldn't do that on a deserted road.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you hit a raccoon at that speed, it's probably going to wipe you out.
And Dan actually has a Corvette, so he could tell you yes or no.
I can tell you definitively, I've not had it up to 156.
3 digits or what? Are we talking 3
digits?
See, sorry, Dan. I was going to say my Canadian brain, that 156. I'm in kilometers, right? So I hear 156. I'm like, yeah, that's, you know, I've been around 140, like on the highway, you know, just cruising. But that's like kilometers. It's my brain just, you know, has trouble wrapping my head around it.
Yeah, I don't know what the kilometers is on that. That's got to be like over 200 for sure.
I was going to say it's kind of similar to the Canadian dollar versus the US dollar. You know, the exchange is very similar. Anyways, guys, we didn't mean to start off with, you know, obviously we were just saying how there's tons of news this week. We're happy you guys are tuning in. Drop some questions in the chat. We've got the Thursday tailgate. We're doing a Dynasty edition with our boy Jordan, the return McNamara, the Dynasty theorist, the philosopher, the author. Jordan, welcome back, brother.
It's good to be back, guys. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. You're absolutely one of my favorite guests. So it's anytime we can get Jordan 100%. On, it's good with me.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I've got the revolving, like, I got you guys on retainer to say nice things about me too. So
yeah, exactly. I'll be sending you my bill later.
Yeah.
So we want to give tonight a bit of a dynasty twist. We've had some serious heavy hitters, obviously from the redraft world, the DFS world. We had Leone on this week. You know, some NFFC Hall of Famers in the last couple weeks on the show, Dan. So we wanted to bring it back to the dynasty roots and talk about, you know, the current news, but how it reflects when we're managing these dynasty teams. And obviously, if we've got some little lineup questions and stuff for week 9, we'll throw that in there as well. Anything off top of the head there, Dan, with regards to news? I know we said it's like I couldn't believe yesterday how many people popped up with COVID, positive COVID tests. I thought, like, when I saw Sidney Crosby after all the football guys, I was like, this has to be some kind of joke or something. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we're going to have to sort through all the COVID stuff, but, you know, I guess one of the ones, you know, that I'm interested in picking Jordan's brain on is like, you know, Calvin Ridley, because that's nebulous situation. How do you value him in Dynasty? What are you doing with him if you're a contender, if you're a rebuilder? What are your thoughts on it so far, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, so I've really much become the guy that I'm shooting for. Like, I want stars, and I've stolen a lot of my recent analytics of Dynasty content and sort of theory from the NBA. And the stars make such a big difference in the NBA. They arguably make even more of a difference in Dynasty. And so if you can get the chance to get a star, a difference maker, you have to inquire about it, right? You have to. And that's why, I've been big in on Watson, and right, because he has the ability to bend the arc pretty substantially. A guy like Ridley can do the same thing at the receiver position. I think the receiver position naturally impacts it less, but he is the same type of guy that at a depressed price you have to be interested in. And I've really changed on that too from the Tyreek Hill scenarios from years past. There was the Zeke stuff too. There was there's a couple of other situations that popped up where I wasn't as aggressive. And 2021 Jordan would have been all over those situations. I'll buy all of the risk because the payoff's really high. And honestly, the risk of them busting isn't terribly substantial, but the impact of them hitting is really big. So that's the lens at which I look through these things. The other thing with Ridley, I mean, he's wide receiver 8 coming in terms of we tracked 254 startup drafts over the off season, and these are just super flex drafts. And he was wide receiver 8 in terms of, that was his median in drafts. And it was at 402. Was his median draft position. And when you look at the guys after him, like it's Chase, who will naturally go ahead of him. And then it's Hopkins, it's McLaurin. Maybe McLaurin goes ahead of him. Hopkins, maybe, depending on the status. Michael Thomas, I doubt, is going to go ahead of him. You got DJ Moore's will probably go ahead of him. Chris Godwin's a little bit of an amorphous situation. You've got Allen Robinson, no. Keenan Allen, I would bet no. Brandon Ayuk, certainly no. I mean, maybe T. Higgins, right? Now you're getting into a whole different level, right? And so I sort of look at that, and I don't see anyone coming from super, super deep that's going to jump up above him. So all of a sudden, like, I think this thing settles out at a point in the offseason where he's going to be, assuming that he's back, or assuming, like, I'm assuming to write off the rest of the season. I think there's a pretty good chance that he's back, but I am using that as my assumption in terms of valuing him. And anything I get more than that is gravy. So I'm viewing him basically in the offseason as like a, sort of a wide receiver 15 or so. That's kind of how I'm viewing him. And, so there's a couple things you do with that, right? If you're contending, pivoting from him up makes a lot of sense. And so, like, I did one today where I went out and I got, I am a contender. I'm pushing for a buy, and I've got Mahomes and I've got Allen. And I went out and I said, I'm just going to go full on nuclear implosion on people, and I'm going to get Tyreek Hill and Diggs, and I'm just going to super stack, and we're just going to have some fun. Right. And,
hashtag always be stacking.
Yeah. And I was like, I'll just, and so I gave up. I gave up Ridley and I gave up Higgins. I think I gave up Fuller and a first. Ended up being the package. But my position was,
nice.
And I was like, listen, if I want two guys that can absolutely bend the arc, like, I think Ridley can do that, but I'm here now, right? Like, yeah, I'm here now. I don't know long term. Like, I suspect he's probably back this year is my hunch. But there's a chance that he's not, and there's a chance that he doesn't bend the arc when he comes back either, because he wasn't, who knows if he's staying in shape, all of those things. That's why I'm kind of writing him off this year. I think, Diggs and Hill are firmly in their prime, and I don't have to worry about, I don't have those apparent issues. So, but that's me being a contender, and that's how I pivoted up. I think pivoting, down or pivoting to him, I think you do it across positions makes a lot of sense. I don't tend to pivot down at positions very often. I want to pivot up in terms of more valuable guys, but that's my sort of angle. I'm willing to embrace him and embrace what he represents as a value, because I think, he's not going to go below wide receiver 20 in the offseason unless he retires. I just have a really hard time seeing that at some point you won't be able to extract that valuation from him. And you treat that as like a random future first. Typically, he's going to have a hard time going beneath that line in terms of where he goes. And so, I mean, anything less than that, I think is a success.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And, you as a non-contender, you definitely want to be sniffing around Ridley for sure. As a contender,
especially
I think he's. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was going to throw in a real quick one. I was just going to say, especially if you have someone like a running back that's performing right now, or someone that's like a more short-term value to trade in for. I think what Jordan said about considering this year write-off for him is the right approach right now.
One other thing to go along with that too is always remember, and this borders on tanking, but this is absolutely not tanking. So I just want to make that clear before I say this. This isn't a tanking. I'm not advocating tanking. Tanking is something totally different. If you have Calvin Ridley on your team and he is taking zeros, he is not helping any potential points consideration about where the picks go. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you're taking a 0 on the back end of your bench, that actually is better for you in terms of if you're rebuilding than having Tajay Sharp there, who if he goes for 2 touchdowns on your bench, you're pulling your hair out because you're taking that and it's making your pick work. It's making your pick later in the round potentially. So that's the other thing with him, that he actually has an added benefit to you as someone that's unavailable as a contender.
He's like an injured player, right?
It's like Michael Thomas. Like Michael Thomas right now, it's like perfect. I'll just stash him and he'll take a 0 and it's fine. Like he's not
his
not
owners are happy today.
Yeah. right. Right. Yeah.
So with Ridley, we kind of treat him almost like it's an ACL or something. I mean, and I don't mean to make light of right. The problems or anything like that, but an ACL is something you expect that people will recover from and be able to resume their career maybe after a little bit of a ramp up time, largely as they were mm-hmm. before. Other than with this, there's with an ACL, you figure it's going to be a year. With this, it could be 1 month, 2 months, 5 months, whatever. We just don't know.
What do you guys think about this trade, Dan? I don't know if you had a chance to. I didn't look at it when I put it up. I just saw like a good trade question, and it's actually a very interesting trade question because he's asking. I get Kelsey for Waller and AP. His other RBs are McNamara, Cardell, Javonte, Herbert, and Jamal Williams. Accept or sit tight. Ruggs gone. Maybe Waller gets fed more.
Man, if you got a chance to get Kelsey, For Waller, I mean, Kelsey is older, but that's pretty tempting.
I feel like this offseason, people would have preferred the Waller side on this because people were kind of putting Waller even at number 1 in a lot of spots. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Jordan?
I mean, it's interesting. I think I wouldn't let AP. I'll say this: I wouldn't let AP get in the way of the decision on this. Right? I think this is totally how you feel about Waller versus Kelsey, and I wouldn't. This is the two of them, and honestly, you're going to probably have to cut someone on the other side of this equation that's pretty close to AP. So this is absolutely how you feel about Kelsey versus Waller. I mean, it's tough to bet against Kelsey. I mean, at some point, you figure he's probably going to stop. And when you think about like him and Gronk, I think are the same age, right? Just think about the different career arcs mm-hmm. that they've gone through. So that's an interesting one for them. I probably take Kelsey. I think there's a little bit more uncertainty there with Waller, but and guys and elite tight ends can play for a long time too. So I mean, their production tends to look a little bit different in terms of but they can totally be productive. And honestly, like a 20% reduction in Kelsey is still like tight end 4, I mean, he's still like a top half of the position tight end mm-hmm. 1. So, that I would probably take the Kelsey side.
Can I ask both of you a question? I want to ask both of you guys this question because I think that I'm struggling with this on some of my, we have many teams, some are contenders, some are rebuilds, some are reno modes. One thing I kind of struggle with is when you have a rebuild or reno mode and you have a younger, very valuable piece. Let's say you're usually in reno mode because your team's not very great. So you're trying to collect picks or young players. But what if you have 3 or 4 legit pieces to move, maybe 2 or 3, and they're younger players, like let's say these Ridleys or these, guys that are not necessarily at the end of the road that are just going to give you the 1 year pop, but their value could be turned into, adding depth or picks to your roster. How do you balance that? I guess is like your future versus rebuilding versus your, how do you decide, okay, you know what, I'm going to move this stud, even though he could be a pillar on my team, in order to build the value of this roster moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. You asking me?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
This is my first time. Sorry, Jordan.
So this is a really interesting question, and I have evolved on this. So I wrote the Analytics of Dynasty Rebuilding Guide, which is totally different than anything I've done before in terms of Analytics of Dynasty. Analytics of Dynasty has always been like a broad strategic sort of concept. But I released for the first time in season, released the Rebuilding Guide. And that was, specifically aimed at this question. Like, sort of, what do you do with this? And I actually did a couple of different case studies, and it's funny when I go back and look at it now about how 5 years ago Jordan treated DeAndre Hopkins versus how present day Jordan treated DeAndre Hopkins. And when you sort of, and this sort of gets to the crux of the issue, do you sort of take that player and do you, trade him for picks or trade him for prospects and try and rebuild, or do you build around them? For me, I have come to the belief that whatever time it is, right? So if right now you're like, man, I need to rebuild, you shouldn't be, unless you have really done massive damage. And I'm talking about massive, massive damage to your team. You should be in the hunt for a playoff bid next year. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's, agreed. There's just so much variance. There's so much that we don't know. And there's so much that you can do in a year in terms of trading, that, planning 2 or 3 years out is just, I think you're just wasting your time and you're wasting your money. And I just, that I see people do that and they'll ask me, I want to contend in 3 years from now. Like, I don't know. After the last year, I'm not even sure I'm going to be alive.
That's why I don't like using rebuild. That's why I call it reno mode. Because for me, it's not. You're not rebuilding. Right. You're just renovating your team, man. You're not completely. What's a rebuild? Like, come on, man. We don't have time for that.
I use retooling. Renovation's good too. Yeah, I mean, right. It's the other thing. I mean, it's that's a great analogy because it's just to think of it's the nature of your team should dictate what you do, right? The nature of your problems. If you've got Ridley, if you've got Michael Thomas, if you've got Deshaun Watson, right? If you got Akers and Dobbins, right? And you're 1 and whatever. What are we? 1 and 7. Right. If that's your lot in life, you don't need to go out and be like, yeah, I need to trade all these guys for assets because you have a bunch of assets that just aren't usable right now. Right. If your team is terrible, right, that's a different thing. And maybe you want some liquidity. Unless I'm going to get a core asset, and what I'm actually working through a theory for Analytics Dynasty 2022 about what an actual core asset is. But generally speaking, and there's different levels to it. There's a core asset, a star asset, and a contributing asset, and then roster fodder is basically after that. At the bottom, unless you're getting if you're trading a top 75 asset and you're not getting one back, you're probably going in the wrong direction. Typically, and if you're trading a top 30 asset and you're not getting one back, again, you're going in the wrong direction. So. And the thing is that we tend to overthink these things. Is the other thing that I would say. If you have that example that I had that I gave you before, where I have Mahomes and I have Josh Allen. I am assuming that nothing calamitous happens to them, right? They don't get themselves in trouble or get hurt. I'm going to the playoffs, right? Probably every year for the next while, right? That's the level of which they're going to raise my floor. I can make a lot of mistakes between now and 5 years from now and probably go to the playoffs at least 4 times. And that's just the level of which they're going to get me. So when you have that, right, you should never be rebuilding. You should constantly, it's like LeBron, right? How many rings has LeBron won? And how many guys have won rings around him? a lot of guys, right? You can fit a lot of different equations around a couple of superstars. And so that's the thing. If you have 3 or 4 or 5 of those guys, of like top 60 guys, like if you have, if you have 5 top 4 round startup picks, like you should be contending, right? And if they're hurt or something, that's one thing, but you should be, if you're not contending with that, it might not necessarily be the pieces that you have, it might be the strategy you're employing. So that's the thing that I would say about, like, be really honest about it. And the retooling renovation thing is a good comp. Think about it in the sense of, like, you have a rodent problem at your house, right? Like, do I need to set out a trap? Do I need to call an exterminator? Or, right, it's because one trap, or maybe I call an exterminator, cost me 10 times what a trap would cost me, right? That's probably the range. Like, I don't need to burn down the neighborhood to get rid of the mouse, right? Like and people love to do that in Dynasty, and
that's a really good, and I really like that, actually.
People love to burn down the neighborhood.
Yeah, man, they'll blow up the whole neighborhood just to kill that one mouse,
Totally. And then they stand there with a pitchfork and they're like, yeah, got that SOB. And it's like,
I
great.
I think a lot of that, Jordan, can be avoided if you are honest with yourself early enough. And I think that's what happens to me with some of these reno teams is I give it 3 or 4 weeks, and I look at the top teams and I'm like, you know what? I need to do something quicker. And if you do it soon enough and you do it well, you can actually make yourself competitive that same season. And I've done that in a couple of leagues this year with some, very competitive players.
That's totally true. And I'll say this too. Like, I've actually, I've talked about this, and people are like, you can rebuild in season, and you have an extra week now, right? So I think that's true. But I have gotten, and I wasn't as much this way before, and I really think that your roster in Dynasty is segmented, right? So it's the top couple of guys, right? It really is. If you have a couple, like I've got a couple of first round startup picks on a couple of teams, and then it's the next tier of guys that are maybe like top 50, top 60, top 70 guys in that range, right? And then it's maybe your guys that are from 75 or so to like, I don't know, like 150 in that range, and then everything else is sort of ancillary. That's kind of the pyramid that I would sort of think about. I want to, and I've become maniacal about it. I am churning the back end of my roster like every single week, and if it's like, I will make more adds or drops, and like there has been weeks this year where, and I actually got one, which is, I'm like, let's turn a 1% bet into a 2% bet, because the odds are the people there aren't going to make a difference for you this year, but they might. And so I'll give you a good example. Like, and this week, like I did it a couple of weeks ago with Ty Johnson. It's probably not going to work out, but the week before, so it was Nick Chubb was missing the week, and the Browns are playing on Sunday, and then had a Thursday game. And I said, like, listen, Dearness Johnson is a priority ad this week, because if something happens to Kareem Hunt, he's got a short week to recover, and Dearness Johnson and Chubb's probably not going to be back. So Dearness Johnson's absolutely in line for a spot start in a week where there's buys, which is hugely consequential, right? Because you can inject 15, 20 points in your lineup when it's hurting, and that can make a difference. And sure enough, Hunt got hurt, Chubb didn't come back, and Dearness Johnson had a big game. Now Dearness Johnson's flex worthy, right? And so, like, constantly doing that stuff. And it's, and it's like, I've had in years past, for example, I'll give you an example of how that hits. Because in years past, I would never move off of a guy like Ramondre Stevenson. Never. Now he's getting benched every other week. Like, even if Damian Harris gets hurt, I'm not sure Ramondre Stevenson's going to get starts. It's week 9, right? If Damian Harris gets hurt this week, now it's week 10. I'm not going to be able to make the decision in week 10. Then maybe I'll know, like, have an idea. Maybe it's a 50-50 shot about who's going to play, right? Whether it is Ramondre Stevenson or not. And then all of a sudden, then their buys coming up. And so what I've really lost, though, is I've lost basically a third of the season with the uncertainty. Whereas with a guy like Dearness Johnson or Ty Johnson, for example, for the Jets right now, like, it's a crystal clear spot, even though it's lower pedigree, even though it's all those things. Like, I'm not trying to win the lotto. I'm trying to win a $2 scratch off, and that's the kind of thing that I'm constantly doing. And if you keep doing those things and just sort of like be almost obnoxious about churning over the back end of your roster with guys that really don't matter hugely consequential to the construct of your team, you can pick off wins, right? And you can pick off, move. I always say move a 1% bet to a 2% bet. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's 100% increase, right? Constantly do that, and those things add up.
It's kind of like holding on to that losing stock and just not letting go, because you don't want to lose that 8% or whatever it is that you're down. You're not going to sell it till it's back up, and it's like you're not able to enjoy the gains from other pieces because you're not moving that piece off of. And Dan, I think you'll agree in FFPC, I think that's kind of the key of doing well in these tournaments is, and you're the king of it, is working that waiver wire every week and churning those bottom 2 or 3 guys. You'll eventually hit, holding them. And like you said, these Stevenson type of players, think about like what ceiling, what am I exactly waiting for? And what are the chances of it happening? Right. Whereas if you can keep moving around and maneuvering different pieces from different offenses, you have a way higher chance of hitting on that.
Well, the other one is McNichols.
Yeah.
Right. Like I'm in 8th place in the Scott Fishbowl, and I have McNichols, right? Like,
look at this guy, Dan, 8th place. Jesus,
it
says it's so cool, like just like it's nothing.
Well, I'm like I'll be in, 108th place by the end of the week, I'm sure. But no, you just think about like the consequence, like that's immensely consequential, right? Like I now have a starting running back that I would bet, I haven't looked, but I would bet the people above me have Henry. And more than one of the people above me have Henry, and so there's and that can change really quickly, right? Like the fortunes of these things can change. And again, in Dynasty, maybe it's a little bit more extreme. You're not necessarily all competing for this year. You might have a little bit more of extreme dispersion of teams and stuff. But if you're in the middle, like that can make an immense difference. Like Jeremy McNichols is the type of player right now that could add you a win over the course of the remainder of the season, which doesn't seem like a ton, but absolutely is, right? So, so that's the thing. Like he's a player that can make a big difference, and you look at those. You just want to get as many of those shots as you can, and this year I've become almost to the point of neurotic about it, where I have to go through every waiver wire and I have to take, every 1% shot has to be a 2% shot, and just keep doing that. And, I have 61% of McNichols, and it's pretty, like the payoff of that can be pretty big.
I'm not doing that bad, guys. 5-3, and Dan, I just had to put that up because I just beat your boy Nelson Souza. So that's my brag of the week right there, and I just passed him in the standings. So there you go.
Well, and we have to let Jordan know that we had Ben Gretsch on, and he's now in first place.
He is in first place.
Yeah. We had Billy Muzio on. He's now in second
crushing
place.
It.
So Jordan,
guys, this is why you tune into the district, man.
Yeah, I know you guys bring in
we don't
just smart people and me.
We don't just bring in talkers, guys. We bring in walkers. We bring in guys that are winning. Smash the like, smash the subscribe, and that's what we do in the district, man.
And we're gonna try to give Jordan the old GOAT district bump and see if we can get him up into first or second place here too. So
Ben's got me by 50 points. He's got me by 50 points.
That's awesome.
So I think Ben actually went pure 0 RB too. I don't think I'm catching him with the Henry deal. So
yeah. I was going to say he's definitely not a Henry owner. We know that much. So, and I do want to, before we get to Kyle's question, which I want to get to, if you're doing contest leagues, getting a little bit off Dynasty, but if you're doing the contest leagues, those players you win for $400, $500, $600, $700 or whatever, the Elijah Mitchells, or if you think Adrian Peterson is worth that or whatever, and if they end up helping you, that feels good. But I'll tell you what, nothing feels better than picking off somebody for $1 or $2 a week before everybody wants them, and they're just every single one of them is going to the waiver wire and they're looking for that guy, and it's like, wait a second, he's not
got
there.
him.
Well, there's even better, Dan. I went into one of my FFPC teams and I had McNichols, Ty Johnson, and Boston Scott that I picked up like 2 or 3 weeks ago. Totally forgot about it. Went in there to put in my bids, and I'm like, I already got all 3. What's up?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because last week too, I started. Yeah, one person in front of me has Henry. So, and they're actually running into it too because they've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like they've got some problems here coming up with
guys. They're up there.
Yeah, they're getting squeezed. Well, they got Cup, They got the Cub Stafford stack, which is really nice. I went the other direction on that one. I'd be in first place if I had gone the other direction, went Cup and went Stafford Cup. I went Stafford Woods.
Yeah.
So that's the difference probably.
You are not alone.
Yeah.
But no, it's interesting because you look at these things and it's, the debate was in the market was like, what do you bid on Mitchell? And I was like, in a format like this after week one, I was like, the answer is to me is like there's zero debate about it. If you want to win, you bet 100, right? Because like that's the type of player that can make a difference for you. You don't know if you're going to get another chance, and I don't care if I come in second place, right? If anything but first place is a loss for me in this, like that's how I'm playing. And you just sort of, you have to take big swings like that, and because the risk of it panning out, like there's 1,000 people plus that are going to miss, right? But you need to be the one. And it's interesting because it's a lot different than what you would do in Dynasty. You know what I mean? So,
yep, exactly. But even in Dynasty, the $1, $2, in the FFPC for sure. You can. I'm always turning the bottom of the roster with $1, $2 players, and I'm picking up some McNichols. I picked up some Boston Scott. Nice little things like that. They just, they tend to fall in your lap if you keep active.
There's even some MFL leagues, Dan, where you can put a $0 bid, and right. I blew my load early. So now I've picked up some guys just because some leagues, let's face it, once the guys are not in the top whatever, they just don't go back. They're not back in there looking at it every week. They're not degenerate like we are here in the district, So you can pick up guys like Dan and Jordan are saying for $1, $0 in your league. Just pay attention what's going on. Let me do a quick one here, guys, before we go to Kyle's question. Kyle, Wheeler, Jimmy, guys, thanks for coming in the chat. Come hang with us, guys, on Thursdays, 7 to 8. We're doing the tailgate. We're answering your questions. We're bringing in some serious guests. And where's my screen here? There it is. Guys, Viridian Global, get all your GOAT gear. Anything fantasy football, really. Guys, look at all these collections they have, right? Just
wow,
literally anything that you want fantasy related, right? And then
I'm wearing my Analytics of Dynasty shirt right now.
Well, there
you go. And like literally anyone you listen to in podcasts and fantasy land are on here. You got the GOAT District gear, support the show. And it's just some really good stuff, guys. Some nice shirts, hoodies, hats. There you go. ViridianGlobal.com. Let's get to Kyle's question, guys. Let me take this off here. So Kyle's asking Dynasty trade. He's maybe feeling a bit of regret. I don't know if he is or not, but he says I moved the unthinkable Jamar Chase. It was Chase and Carter before Carter started producing 3 weeks ago for Swift, F1 McLaurin, and 2022 second. This is actually a very interesting trade. Jordan, where are you at on this?
I wonder what the format is just in terms of what the pick matters.
Kyle, if you're listening, drop it.
It probably doesn't much matter.
Let me give a quick tip. Whenever you're asking a trade question and there's an actual pick involved, that or a quarterback or a tight end, that's when you need to specify what your format is. Otherwise, it's cool, right? If they're just running back and receivers, right. Unless you got 3 receivers or something like that. But usually, if you got a pick in there, try to specify. Let's go.
I'll just assume Superflex. It doesn't really much matter. I mean, it's pretty close. I don't think it matters. I would take the Swift side. I think with Jamar Chase right now, we are betting. The bet you are making on Jamar Chase is the bet you made on AJ Brown 2 years ago, which is that there's a player that comes in that performs massively over expectation on positive variance that will continue doing it. And now you're paying the consequence of that because AJ Brown's performing much more in the wide receiver 2-3 landscape than he is the 1 landscape where he was performing, double over his touchdown expectation. And it's like, we could have either he's the greatest wide receiver of all time or he was going to regress. Like there's, and the answer most of the time isn't that they're the greatest of all time. Most of the time is that they're going to regress. And so that's the deal with Chase. It's the exact same situation. And so I would bet against that, and I would take Swift and McLaurin. And I think I haven't looked this up, and I will as we're sitting here. But I would guess if I had to bet that McLaurin and Chase are pretty close to each other in terms of expected points, and that it is actually Chase that's way overperforming that, and that's a variance stat. That's not necessarily a skill thing. 100% out of 100. Like it to me, this much more feels like you're getting Swift for Carter than it feels like anything else.
Let me ask you this: is that second? If you take the second away, Dan. Because I feel like I'm surprised that the second is on the Swift and McLaurin side, because those are your two proven guys, and that's usually where the heavier weight lies. And then because Carter, he's saying he did this before Carter hit.
Right. Well, I think part of it is Chase is basically according to the DLF ADP that's just coming out for November. Chase is the number one asset in all of Dynasty.
Yeah,
and that I think is bound to change. I mean, that's like the most obvious sell high. If somebody's at number one, there's only one place they can go, and that's down.
Right.
So, you just, you owe it to yourself to explore what the options are. And the thing is, McLaurin is facing a lot more headwinds than Chase is right now. To me, the main value of Chase over McLaurin is just, that you gain 4 years of age, something like that. So, because McLaurin's 26, Chase is 21, 22. Your Carter and Swift, I think, are pretty much the same age. They're both running backs on bad teams that catch the ball well.
Chase isn't even 22 yet, Dan. He's 21 and a half.
Yeah, there you go. So, that's kind of the main value is, you're a lot farther from the age apex on Chase than you are with McLaurin. But, when you get the 22 second, I think that helps out a lot. And Swift over Carter, I think, is definitely a no-brainer. So,
well, and the flip side of this too is like you could put, and I was looking at that ADP. I think Swift was like the third or fourth asset in that, if memory serves. Like, Katie, I don't know if you're looking at it, but I'm pretty sure because I know Taylor was the first. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. If memory serves, it went Chase, Taylor, Jefferson, and then Swift. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure Swift was the fourth guy. So this is
correct.
This is just the flip side of, all right, fine. It's Swift and a second for Chase, right? That's how you value that. Okay. And then you say, all right, well, McLaurin smashes Michael Carter, smashes him. So that's right. Yeah. Again, and if the person that wants to take Jamar Chase at 1 in all of Dynasty right now is the sucker in the room. You know how it's like, what's the thing from Rounders or whatever? It takes you however long to figure out, the sucker in the room.
If you haven't figured out who the sucker at the table
is, it's
probably you.
Right. Yeah. And that's the person that takes Jamar Chase at 1 right now. So I'll just PFF has the stat, which is expected points. And expected points right now, Jamar Chase, 14.8 points. When you break that down a little bit, he's expected for 3.8 touchdowns. He has 7. He's expected for 515 yards, and he has 786. Right, so that's way outlier in terms of situation. When you rank his, and so again, he leads the league in terms of points over expectation. So basically how well he's performed over what his situation is the easiest way to think about that. When you look at where he ranks at the position, he ranks 30th, which is dead smack in the middle of running back 3 land. Wide receiver 3 land in terms of expectation. When you look at McLaurin, he is wide receiver 11 in terms of expectation, and he's performing just underneath that expectation. And that is, it's pretty neutral in terms of the reason for that. Right? It's just a little bit, it's like a touchdown less than expectation, basically. So you look at all that and you say, all right, like which direction are these players going? And for me, it's pretty clear that Chase is going down in terms of his point production. And I don't want to be the guy that bought him high.
Right.
And because the insulation the argument people would make is he's really insulated. He's only insulated until he's not, right? Until he starts performing like Amari Cooper did for the first couple of years of his career. And all of a sudden, now Amari Cooper is a wide receiver 2 because everyone put him up there, right? I mean, the list is as long as time of the guys that we've elevated to wide receiver 1 off small sample sizes that were high variance. DK Metcalf. Last year it was an ongoing thing. So just don't do that this year. I mean, that's the easiest thing for me. Chase is the easiest sell in all of Dynasty because there will be a buyer.
Yeah, there you go. And let's talk about number 11 on this list too. Because this is sort of a, kind of a different situation altogether, where you have Pitts, who, basically has been the golden child at tight end since he declared for the draft. And yet there's still really not that much real production that's going on with him. I mean, he's had a couple nice weeks, sure, but he's not a high performing tight end asset as of yet. I mean, you're betting he's going to be, but how do you handle it as far as like valuing Pitts? Do you think he should be at number 11? Do you think he should, lower, higher? What do you think, Jordan?
I mean, the question is it's all team build in terms of like what you're trying to accomplish is sort of my thought on that. When you look at him, he is, in terms of fantasy points, he is actually 9th in terms of per game stats. Let me actually take that. Let's see here. I think that's right. No, there's a couple of people in front of him that don't qualify. Let's see. So he's 8th in terms of per game stats, it looks like. And when you look at him, it's at 13.7 points. That's just pure PPR. He's basically, it's a pretty big gap between him and Kelsey. It's a 4-point gap when you sort of look down. That's the difference between Pitts and tight end 18. So, that's you say, okay, he's tight end 8, but it's actually that gap is pretty big. And there's a steep drop off at tight end too. So he's performing fine. I just wonder, right, what's the end, right? If he's not Kelsey over the next few years, like, have you blown that pick? I don't know what their format is in terms of tight end premium or what presumptions they put into that ADP. But you have to really be a difference maker at tight end to matter. Like, really, tight end 4 doesn't really move the needle much. Right. You have to almost be 1 or 2. That's historically where it's been to really, really make a difference. And it's a really steep drop from 1 to 4, basically. And if you're not going to sort of get to the elite strata, that's essentially what you're saying has to happen for Pitts. Again, he's on a good track to start, but I probably wouldn't invest that high in him.
And does that mean he's a sell?
I mean, I would inquire. It's team direction specific about what you're trying to accomplish. And I have him in some premium formats where, I actually have him in a spot where I'm playing him in like a flex, which in the premium format is really helpful because he's getting, I think it's 2 PPR. It's a little juiced in the way it is. It's essentially 2 PPR for tight end, which really matters in the format. So he's getting that boost and that benefit. Would I draft him at tight end 1? Probably not. I would just choose to go other ways, right? You can get Mark Andrews at a discount. I'm not sure like they're massively different in terms of their expectations going next 3 years, 5 years. And after that, like, I think it's a fool's errand to try and guess what's going to happen 5 years from now, just because it's really tough to do. It's really tough, and your margin's so wide. So, I mean, I've more done that. And I've actually found a lot more success with just trying to play in like a 3-year window of like production and not necessarily value 5-10 years from now, because I mean, honestly, after this year, like, who knows if I'm going to be here. So that's really that's the difference. It's been an eye-opening experience in terms of like, hey, let's enjoy this while we have it right now.
Yeah.
And we can't predict it, so the two of those things.
I just think it's an interesting conundrum for, like a team that's in reno mode. If you somehow landed Cal Pitts, do you make him part of your rebuild, or do you do you cash in on the value that he's got right now and try to, move that into other positions?
Can you get a first and Hawkinson for Pitts?
I don't.
It would be something I would definitely explore.
I would do that all day, but I don't know that you could. I guess. I mean, T-Hawk hasn't necessarily lived up, so maybe. I'm trying to see where exactly he is right now.
I bet you could. At least if
he's ahead of him in points per game. You know what I mean? So like that's the thing. Like that. See, that's what I would do in terms of like if I was trying to pivot off of Pitts, I would do those sorts of things. Can you pivot to like? Can you get Andrews in a first? I don't know if you can, but I would try. You know what I mean? Like that would be
Jordan's speaking my language. That's exactly where I start when I'm trying to move the pivot, right? With a pick. That's the ideal.
Right. Yeah, because I don't know if they're that much different. Like Pitts to be that much different than Andrews is asking a lot. And again, it's not to say it's impossible, but I'm going to bet the no side of that on most players most of the time. I'm just not going to.
Wheeler's he's throwing Goddard in a first. I feel like I usually I go with the tiers. Yeah. Like I'm looking for a guy in the same tier that I consider in the same tier and then getting extra with it.
Yeah. I don't think Goddard in a first is enough. I think you can get more.
No, I'd want Goddard in a first and a second at least.
Or not yet anyways. Not yet. If you're trying to make that move.
Right.
But
that's the way you want to go. I think it's better to do that than like AJ Brown is Pitts is at number 10, Pitts is at 11, AJ Brown's at 10, Tyreek Hill is at 12. Just a straight pivot from Pitts to one of those guys. I'm not sure if it really accomplishes that much, but if you can kind of step down and take somebody who you feel has the ability to move up into it, and that to me is what the rental is all about. Is you're trying to you sell your assets kind of at the peak of ripeness when you need to move them for assets that you feel strongly are just they're depressed in price for whatever reason. And Terry McLaurin, because he's got Taylor Heineke thrown into him, and the odds that his quarterback situation is going to improve from that is pretty high at some point. So those are the kind of moves you want to make.
And just to touch on what Jordan was saying with regards to like if Pitts is in your flex and he's not even your starting tight end, maybe you have Kelsey or Waller, and maybe you need a third strong quarterback, and maybe Pitts can get you that quarterback in a super flex league, like one of those harder positions to get. For me, that's the move, because I say it often. It's like my move now in tight end premium is I'm getting that tight end when the rest of my roster is ready to really compete. Then I'll go out and pay a bit more for one of those top 2 or 3 guys to plug in that final piece to take me to the promised land. And I've done it and it's worked. And that's kind of my, tried and true approach with tight end premium. But in Superflex, if the guy who pops, especially if you drafted a guy like Pitts and he can now get you a quarterback, whether it's your second quarterback or your third, I think that's a strong move as well for me in a Superflex league.
Yep, definitely makes sense. And one of the things is in tight end, in leagues that aren't tight end premium, a lot of times people really do kind of discount that position, and it's easier than you think sometimes to move up into the elite or semi-elite tight end area, like Logan Thomas or something like that. I certainly wouldn't call him elite. Dallas Goedert certainly wouldn't call him elite. But they're guys that you can get for cheaper than you think.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you go to those bottom teams, right? And you offer them those picks and those kind of hopes and dreams for those proven pieces. That's the move.
Right. Exactly.
Anything this week, guys, with we got about 10 minutes left here. Anything with regards to like starting lineups or anything coming into this week? Tonight we have my Colts, the big battle between Carson Wentz and Mike White coming into to week 9 on a Thursday night. It's like 10.5 is the spread right now in favor of the Colts. And then, we obviously have some interesting matchups as we get through the weekend. Anything stand out to you guys with regards to matchups this weekend, or any decisions that you have to make that are a little tougher?
Carson Wentz is the 2-score favorite. That's astonishing.
Unbelievable, eh? Thank you, Jonathan Taylor. Thanks,
That's
JT.
Astonishing.
Go Colts.
Yeah, I had one league where I was choosing between Wentz and David Carr for quarterback. and they've scored pretty similarly.
I was going to say it's very similar.
Yeah. But I just decided to go Carr just based on the fact that, it is Thursday night, and it seems like those games are a little bit more low scoring a lot of the time. And with the Colts being a big favorite, if they get a lead, they might just lean on Jonathan Taylor. And, so I just kind of felt like a little bit more of the upside was with Carr. But what do you guys think? Was that?
The over-under is close. It's 4.5 to 46.5. So the point totals are very similar. Vegas is a 3-point favorite over the Giants. What do you think, Jordan?
I would take. I like Carr over Wentz. I just trust him more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
can't blame you.
To put it.
Yeah,
we saw a couple of the passes that went through this past week. So.
Yeah, I was there for that pick six, which was I still believe was the worst pass in NFL. People were like,
at the game? Were you at the game?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just was. People were defending him, and listen, I know that people are going to say here's Jordan's anti-Wentz thing. He had a minute to get rid of the ball. He had a minute. It was all the time in the world. He could have done anything with it, and he just stood there and then threw it. And it was like, dude, like this has been the story of his entire career that he hangs onto the ball way too long, and he just doesn't. He won't. Right? I mean, I think it was like the worst. It was a pretty bad pass. So.
Let me ask you guys this. These running backs that everybody's dropping a bunch of money on this week in waiver wire, the Petersons, the McNichols, the Bostons, any of these guys that you're starting or not starting, like you pick these guys up and this week for week 9, whether it's Ty Johnson, there's anyone that you're hesitant, I guess, to start out of that bunch. Dan, I'll go to you first.
I mean, I'm not too hesitant to start McNichols just because I think, I do think Peterson's going to, he's going to get a dozen carries or so.
Okay.
The guy's a pro. He's been around forever. The running game is a lot easier to pick up. It's just basically you just need to know, what the blocking scheme is and where you're supposed to go with it. You don't need to worry about blitz pickups or anything like that. So, he'll get in there and he'll get his carries. But against a team like the Rams, I would see Tennessee possibly being down a good bit, and then they have to pass, and Peterson's certainly not going to be very active in the passing game, I would think, in week 1, and that's going to put McNichols right there. Mm-hmm. And if they're in long down and distance or 2-minute offense or anything like that, I think that's going to be McNichols all the way. So, I think he's going to probably get some high leverage touches, so I don't mind having him in there at all. Boston Scott definitely would throw him in there. I'd even give Kenny Gainwell another shot this week just because I don't think the Eagles are going to be running with that same game script of, having a huge lead. So without that, I think then Gainwell gets involved a lot more. So, if you really need a guy, I mean, I know that's kind of digging a little bit deep, but sometimes we have to do that. What do you think, Jordan?
I'm fine with McNichols. I'm interested to see what Peterson's going to offer. But if you told me that one of these guys is going to make a difference down the stretch, like I'm absolutely taking McNichols. And I don't think it's like he's got two-way ability. He bounced around a little bit. I think there was some Hard Knock stuff with him too, if memory serves. Like he got cut. He was a storyline in Hard Knocks a while ago too. So he's sort of been, he's been around the block a little bit. But I mean, he has the ability to sort of catch as well. I think this offense, they should take this opportunity to remake this offense a little bit and throw more because I don't know, this was literally, what's amazing to me is that this was by almost any measure other than just aggregate total counting numbers, this has been the worst year of Derrick Henry's career. In terms of yards after contact, in terms of yards per carry, which is a terrible stat, but in terms of PFF grade, in terms of missed tackles, in terms of carries per missed tackles, it was all of his efficiency stats were down. They were just giving him the ball a ton. And as a result, he was scoring a ton and doing all that stuff, but it was one of those things where the volume was actually, I think, counterproductive to them. If they take some of that stuff and throw it, right. I mean, this is an easy one. 4.3 what is bigger, 4.3 or 7.6? 7.6 is always greater than 4.3, and that's the yards per attempt on a Tannehill throw versus the yards per carry on a rush, right? It's 7.6 is always bigger. This is like we're going through the basketball revolution of football, and it's when we realized that 3 was bigger than 2. This is kind of what the math points to. Let's do that.
Right, exactly. I mean, you throw to get the lead, and then if you want to run out the clock, fine. But
right.
But you also don't want to start doing that too quickly. But, one of the things I like about McNichols is, he really came in with, kind of a profile where if you squint, you can see, an every down back. He's 5'9", he's 214. So he's got, a nice BMI. He was certainly productive in college, a nice dominator rating, a good solid college target share. I mean, he was one of those people that when he came out, the draft community was always looking at him going, yeah, and we were dreaming of him getting drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round. And when he gets drafted in the 5th round or whatever, it was like, well, so much for that. I guess he's, he probably will bounce around. But sometimes those guys that bounce around for a while, all of a sudden, a la Mike Davis, another 5th rounder, you get in the right situation and boom, you might make something of it. If Peterson pulls a hammy or something like that in week 1, we could be looking at the McNichols revolution here. So I definitely like taking a chance on McNichols. When I was doing my bids and in the contest weeks, I went pretty close to the same for McNichols and for Adrian Peterson. I thought McNichols would go for less, but I still put in the same bid for him that I put in for Peterson, just because I wanted him a little bit more. I wasn't too disappointed by losing out on Peterson, but McNichols for sure was worthwhile.
Hey, we got him for $1.99, Dan, in AP in that Pros versus Joes.
Yeah,
and that's what I did. I basically put them both up for the same. I'm surprised where McNichol is actually on waiver wires because I don't know. I feel like he should have been picked up weeks ago with the even just the targets he was getting, even when Henry was there in some of those games. All right, guys. It's 7:59. We appreciate Kyle. What's up? Thanks for joining. Wheeler, everybody. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for tuning in. Smash the like, guys. Smash the subscribes. Jordan, remind the people one more time where they can find your goodness. And Dan, we take it for granted, but this bad boy's up there in football, guys, and he's pretty big deal. He's one of our faves. But just remind the peeps all the goodness that you drop out there in fantasy land, Jordan.
No, I just pay for mentions from you guys, put them on my resume, and send it out, and that's how I get all the. It's a vicious cycle here. It's good. You can find all the stuff at analyticsdynasty.com. Check out the rebuilding guide. It's there if you're thinking about trying to retool your team. Go do that. You can find all my work over there. Analytics Dynasty 2022 edition's coming out. Maybe I'll have to come back on and make a formal announcement with you guys at some point around the holiday. The Football Guys Dynasty Show, and check me out on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty. We'll chat.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to have you on when you get close to releasing that bad boy, because it's
for sure.
The Jordan's books, without a doubt, are favorites of mine. It's just a lot of good information, consolidated down to the point where you're not sifting through a lot of stuff. It's just kind of right there for you.
It's gonna be totally different this time too. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be way different than probably I've done before. I think that's how it's gonna end up coming out. So it'll be fun.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to it because, again, it just kind of, he's got a lot of things that crystallize things that have been floating around in my brain. And, Jordan's out there doing the grunt work with the stats and everything else to prove that I was either right to think what I was thinking or occasionally, that's really not it. So
it's usually right. You're usually right.
Usually. I try to be, but,
especially when I pay you to do it.
Right. All right, but thanks for coming on, Jordan. Anything else, JD?
No, that's it, guys. Check out on U.S. Thanksgiving. We're gonna do a special. I'll get a couple of my Canuck buddies. I got Ty lined up from the True North, and a couple other guys to come on, and we'll do a tailgate special on that Thursday, maybe like 10:30, 11:30 type of thing in the morning. Get you guys ready for the big day and the games that weekend. But guys, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, smash the like. We're November's packed, and I know you saw the guest list that Theo threw up. We've got a packed menu for you guys. A bunch of goats, heavy hitters, winners, and the best in the industry. So stay tuned. Good luck this weekend, guys, and enjoy the game tonight. Go Colts. We'll check you all later.